Hello everybody, my name is 7th Bracken, this is my show, TheSilveredCloud, and today I'm reviewing yet another series starter. In my review of Sonic Force's Moment of Truth, I said that I would be reviewing a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog comics. And while I did make good on that statement in my 7th and 8th reviews, there are still several hundred Sonic comics that I can review. Which is why today's review is of Sonic the Hedgehog #1. Of the IDW series, that is. For those of you who don't know, Archie Comics started publishing a serialized license comic for the Sonic the Hedgehog series in 1993. And it got very popular. So popular that it lasted for 290 issues, not counting spin-off comics, making it the longest-running comic based off a video game franchise. Unfortunately, it wasn't popular enough to avoid being cancelled. Yeah, due to a combination of legal disputes with a former writer, inconsistent sales, legal disputes with a former writer, and legal disputes with a former writer, all of which I won't be talking about right now, the Archie comics were forced into doing a soft reboot, and then forced into being discontinued. A sad state of affairs, as people had gotten to know and love this series over the course of roughly 24 years, so having it all just suddenly end was disheartening to say the least. Fortunately, IDW was quick to scoop up the rights to make a Sonic the Hedgehog comic book, as well as most of the prior comics' creative team. And, even though they weren't continuing the Archie continuity, IDW started a new comic in 2018. So let's dig into IDW Sonic #1 and see how it sets up a new comic continuity for the fastest thing alive.
Blue streak speeds by Sonic the Hedgehog, too fast for the naked eye. Sonic the Hedgehog.
I won't be taking a look at the cover, though not because of a shortage of things to say about it. On the contrary, I have a lot to say about this cover, and nearly every other cover these comics have had so far. Mostly how the A covers are not as good as the B covers. But that's a topic for another video. That said, that isn't the main reason why I'm not analyzing the cover now. Much rather, I'm putting off discussing this cover because it's part of a connecting cover with one part for each of the 4 first issues of the comic. As such, it'll be more appropriate to discuss this image later down the line. All that said, I really should get on with this review. Now then, the comic opens on a flashback to some of the games. By the way, this comic is in continuity with the games, even taking place in the aftermath of Sonic Forces. Something which I have mixed feelings on. On the one hand, I like it when mechanics and stage items from the games are incorporated into the comics, if only because a world where giant loop-de-loops and bouncy springs are regular features of topography is something I find fascinating. On the other hand, when Sonic Forces was coming out, Sega made a bunch of asinine retcons to the series. But none of those have anything to do with this issue, and this comic series is still good in spite of them, so I'll talk about those retcons when they're actually relevant. What is relevant right now is the narration boxes on this page. Sonic the Hedgehog has spent years fighting the forces of Dr. Eggman. Granted, not for as many years as Mega Man has fought Dr. Wily, but still. But after their last battle, Dr. Eggman vanished. Which, seeing as all he did was step out to pick up some milk and cigarettes, it's a little strange that he hasn't gotten back by now. But his robot army did not. And those robots are currently attacking a town. To which this guy tries to hold them off, but he spends more time quaking in his boots than using his Wispin, so he just gets knocked down. Fortunately, our titular hero shows up to save him, and the rest of the town as well. And, while he makes quick work of the standard issue badniks, he runs, into trouble when he encounters a super badnik, which people who've played the games might recognize as an egg hammer, one of the tougher robots made by Robotnik, which the comic demonstrates well by showing that, not only can it deal a lot of damage, but it can also block Sonic's spin attack with the staff of its hammer. Fortunately, this is Sonic we're talking about. He's beaten countless stronger foes in just the games alone, so one Super Badnik is no big deal. 4 of them, though? Yeah, that's a bit more difficult to deal with. And, while he was able to avoid being Sideracked by briefly becoming an underground phenomenon, he still has to take down 4 metal-plated Goliaths. Easier said than done, especially when, unlike the games, they're free to give chase here, and they are faster than they look. Which you wouldn't think would be possible, but Sonic and Eggman have been battling each other for years now, so it only makes sense that Dr. Robotnik would make his Badniks go faster at some point. Fortunately for Sonic, he is saved from being crushed by... wait, Tails? Actually being useful? Oh, IDW, you got this all wrong! Tails isn't supposed to actually be competent, he's supposed to spout confusing techno-jargon and break down into a cowering fit like a little bitch. I mean, really, when has Tails ever been characterized as anything other than a useless sidekick? Good lord, Sonic Forces was stupid! Fortunately, Ian Flynn was well aware of that when he was writing this comic. As such, Tails' characterization here basically acts as confirmation that, despite this story acting as a sequel to that game, none of Sonic Force's stupidity will feature here. And Tails kicks his prior characterization to the curb by actually being awesome and fighting alongside Sonic here. I mean, seriously, a combined spin attack from the duo is not only strong enough to one-shot one of the egg hammers, but it also breaks through the pole guard that Sonic wasn't able to get past earlier.
That was awesome.
And, while the rest of the fight is great as well, what really sells Tails as being a great character here is his dialogue with Sonic. Granted, any interactions between the pair that don't depict Tails as just a useless sidekick / walking science textbook would be an improvement over Forces. But this story establishes a great dynamic between the pair, with Tails being a well-mannered realist in comparison to Sonic being a rambunctious optimist. Best exemplified when Tails mentions that they'd be mopping up the Badniks faster if they had Knuckles with them, and Sonic brushes that off. Which gets immediately contradicted when the remaining Badniks begin beating a hasty retreat. Of course, letting them go so they can attack another town some other day isn't a good idea, so the pair work to stop them, with Sonic taking out the final egg hammer, while Tails goes to cut the smaller ones off from escaping. However, Tails does one better, and times closing the town gate just right so that the Badniks slam right into it, destroying themselves in the process.
Great shot, kid! That was 1 in a million!
And, with all of Robotnik's stray robots turned to scrap, time to celebrate, right?
No.
Yeah, as Tails is quick to point out, after Eggman's disappearance, his Badnik army did remain, but they were little more than pests at most. But today was different, as the use of unified troop movements and the appearance of a Super Badnik, never mind 4, is a whole lot more organized than they've been in a long time. Sonic didn't notice, because he's never really been one to give thought to the how and why of Robotnik's robots. Something else that makes Sonic and Tails great here, as well-written characters should highlight each other's traits by interacting with each other. Again, something else that makes this comic a fun read. But now that Tails has pointed out how dangerous the Badniks have become recently, Sonic wonders if this means that Eggman has returned. However, Tails is quick to shoot that idea down, as Robotnik has seldomly been subtle, preferring instead to make a show of his power when enacting a plan. That's not to say that Eggman has never used trickery or subterfuge. He has. It's just that it isn't his preferred way of operating, or even acting. After all, this is the guy who has made several high-tech fortresses that were also theme parks. So returning without any grandiose stunt would be really out of character for him, so something else has to be causing the Badniks to operate more effectively. Well, that is unless after Eggman disappeared, his mind was altered, causing him to act differently. But really, what are the odds of that happening? Regardless of what's causing the Badniks to act the way they are, Sonic is going to dash off to find and stop the rest of them before anybody gets hurt. And this leads to a scene which... I'm sure is supposed to follow up on Tails' non-arc from Sonic Forces, but it's too well written and too different to how either of them acted in Forces for that to make sense. And this is the case every time the IDW comic has a plot point which seems to connect back to that game. It's like a better version of Force's story happened in this comic's continuity, and I'm just sitting here thinking, gee, the version of Forces these guys are talking about sounds a lot better than the version we got. Essentially, the gist of this scene is that Tails is concerned that Sonic could get captured or hurt, and Sonic notices and assures the kid that he'll be alright. He even offers Tails the chance to tag along with him, and he almost accepts, but he chooses not to when he realizes that the people in this town need his help more. Specifically, his skill as an engineer to aid in repairing the town, and to defend them if more badniks stop by, which is yet more great characterization for Tails. Sure, he may want to follow in Sonic's footsteps as a hero, but he's also his own person with a slightly different skill set, so going off to do things his own way is exactly what I've come to expect from him. So yeah, Tails is staying behind to help the locals, Sonic is going off to take on more badniks, and as he goes, he is being observed by a mysterious individual, in a chair with Eggman's insignia on it. Deploy battalion to the next nearest town. He'll be drawn to it like a moth to a flame. Okay, I know you want to get Sonic killed off, but come on, dude, a free chili dog stand would be just as alluring to him, and if you poison his meal, you wouldn't have to waste a perfectly good battalion on this. Make sure word of Sonic's latest success reaches the Resistance. I want to crush both hedgehogs in one strike. And the first issue ends with the reveal that Amy Rose is the other hedgehog that the mysterious individual wants dead. Despite being a little light on substance, I give IDW Sonic #1 a 7 out of 10 both objectively and personally. Surprisingly, while Tracy Yardley's art is oft exemplary, I found that it wasn't that great here. Don't get me wrong, his drawing still looks good here, but seeing as this is the first issue of what is supposed to be a long-running comic, one would think that Yardley would have put his best effort into this project. But instead, his art here seems like something he would have done for practice rather than anything else. Heck, even the variant cover he made for this issue is easily better looking than the interiors, which just makes said interiors' mundanity even stranger. But that's the thing, this art isn't objectively bad or even objectively mediocre, it's just more average than what I've come to expect from this artist. As such, I can't really fault this comic for that, especially when everything else about this comic is either good or great, with the most standout element being just how good Sonic and Tails' interactions are. Not only is it made clear that these guys work together excellently when fighting, but their dialogue establishes them as good friends who've been doing this hero thing for a long time. And while there are other Sonic comics that give more focus to Sonic and Tails' relationship, or simply have much more interesting interactions between the pair, one thing this comic has over the others is timing. This comic was published less than a year after Sonic Forces came out, and utterly butchered Tails' character. So seeing Sonic and Tails being written as equals was a nice breath of fresh air. And to think, all it took to not write Tails like a useless sidekick was to not write Tails like a useless sidekick. Who knew? So yeah, IDW Sonic #1 is a fun read, and, while later issues would get a lot better, it still lays a good foundation for every other story that would follow it. Needless to say, if you're interested in reading the IDW Sonic comics, starting from the first issue is a great idea. And that's all I have to say. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and tune in next week for my next review. Until then, have a good day. You know, I did say that Tracy Yardley's art in this issue isn't that good, but this drawing of Amy Rose is really cute. Almost makes me wish that he did the artwork for the second issue. Almost.